because my son's family, who are doctors, will be setting up their practice downstairs. You need to move out by tomorrow. Patricia, my mother-in-law, tells me to leave every time she sees me. She doesn't have to snap like that. I was already planning to leave in a couple of weeks. Besides, this is my house. Why should I have to put up with this? And honestly, I wonder if they can even afford the $20,000 rent. But it's none of my concern as I prepare to leave. Or so I thought. Until something happened that I couldn't ignore. I told you to leave by tomorrow, didn't I? Watch out. Patricia suddenly shoved me by the shoulder, almost causing me to fall down the stairs. Fortunately, I dropped my shopping bags and grabbed the handrail just in time to save myself. I rubbed my stomach, feeling relieved. That was dangerous. What if something happened to the baby? Well, it's your fault for not leaving sooner. Patricia stormed inside and slammed the front door shut. Gripping the handrail tightly, I stood up. If she wants me out so badly, I'll move up my schedule and leave right now. I marched down the stairs and called immediately. How many of your largest trucks can you provide? 20 10-ton trucks. Perfect. Let's schedule them for 4 days from now. Patricia will learn what happens when she truly angers me. My name is Jennifer. I'm 38 years old and run a family-style restaurant. The business was passed down from my father and has seats for over 500 guests. We've had many regular customers since my father's time, and the place is always bustling. The restaurant occupies the first floor, while the second and third floors serve as living spaces. After my father retired, my parents continued living upstairs with me, but about a year ago, they moved out. It wasn't because of any bad blood between us. Welcome back. Tough day again. Heading to the bath. Yes, I'll take a quick soak. All right, I'll get our drinks ready for dinner. I got married at nearly 40. Having spent most of my life focused on work, I hadn't had much time for romance. So it was my first marriage. Matthew, my husband, worked in IT and was equally devoted to his career, making it his first marriage at 40 as well. Since I already had the restaurant, Matthew moved in with me after our wedding. Though he was okay with living with my parents, they decided not to intrude on our newlywed life and moved out themselves. That said, they live nearby, so we can see them anytime. And so, Matthew and I started our life together as a couple. It's been great, except for some minor issues that arose after my parents moved out. Where did we store the fan? Maybe in the storage room on the 3rd floor. I checked the one on the 2nd floor, but it wasn't there. Then it must be in the other storage room on the 3rd floor. With a determined grunt, Matthew lifted himself off the couch and headed upstairs. My restaurant is quite large. Naturally, the living space on the 2nd and 3rd floors is just as spacious. Even when it was just me and my parents, we always had extra rooms in the house. Now that Matthew and I live together, the number of unused rooms has increased even more. All the extra rooms have turned into storage spaces. We often forget where we put things, so searching for lost items has become a regular event. I think the number of storage rooms would decrease if we had kids, but being almost 40, neither Matthew nor I want to get our hopes up too much. Honestly, as long as I have Matthew, I feel contented. I believe he feels the same way. However, our household was about to grow in an unexpected way. It all began shortly after we got married. Wow, the living space here is really huge. What's this room? Oh, a storage room. And this one? Another storage room. Huh. Patricia, I'd appreciate it if you didn't open the rooms too much. Why? It's not like looking at them will make them disappear. Besides, it's fine, isn't it? What's on the third floor? Patricia gleefully started climbing the stairs. Matthew and I exchanged troubled looks and followed her up. Patricia had seen the shop area before we got married, but back then, my parents were still living here, so she hadn't seen the residential space. When she heard that my parents had moved out after our marriage, she became curious to see what the house looked like. After Patricia's impromptu room tour ended, we went back down to the living room on the second floor. She sat on the couch, took a sip of the tea I served, and brought up something that caught our attention. You've got so many extra rooms. Isn't it a waste not to use them? Well, yes, I suppose. But honestly, Matthew and I only need the living room and bedroom. Having lots of storage space is quite convenient, though. Patricia gave both of us a look that seemed to say, "So, should I move in here with you?" But such an important decision couldn't be made on the spot. I discreetly poked Matthew's thigh with my finger, making sure Patricia wouldn't notice. If we have kids someday, the rooms will fill up quickly. We'd need a nursery. And with kids, more stuff comes naturally. I can't imagine we'd use all these extra rooms, though. Matthew skillfully deflected the topic. Patricia knew that while Matthew and I hoped to have kids, we didn't want to set ourselves up for disappointment. Sensing it wasn't a topic to push further, she let the conversation trail off. After Patricia left, Matthew and I finally felt free to speak openly. Patricia was definitely angling to move in with us, wasn't she? Yay, she was. What if she outright asks to move in? Should we say no? I wouldn't mind, honestly, but I think it's something we should discuss and consider properly first. Jumping into a shared living arrangement without preparation isn't ideal. Got it. If Mom ever says she wants to move in, we'll have a proper discussion with all three of us before deciding anything. I had a feeling that we'd be having that discussion sooner rather than later. However, my prediction turned out to be wrong, and Patricia didn't come to the house for more than half a year, nor did she contact us. According to Matthew, her father-in-law had passed away 3 years ago, and she was likely enjoying a quiet life alone now. But even Matthew's guess was off, and a few more months passed before that day suddenly arrived. Put that one in this room, and that one next door. Wait a second, Patricia, what is all this? Looks like the surprise was a success. My shock was only natural. It was my day off, and I was relaxing at home when movers suddenly arrived, bringing in a massive amount of belongings. I had so many questions. But if I talk to Patricia first alone, things will get really complicated from here. So I decided to hold back and wait for Matthew to get home from work before trying to talk to her. Why did you cancel your lease and move here without even consulting us? When Matthew returned that evening, he immediately began questioning Patricia. But Patricia didn't seem to think she had done anything wrong, her expression light and even smiling. Oh, come on, there's plenty of room here. Or are you saying you'd kick me out when I have nowhere else to go? Do you dislike living with me that much? That's not the point. There's a proper order to things. But if I told you in advance, it wouldn't have been a surprise, would it? Why was Patricia so fixated on making this a surprise? I couldn't understand it at all. Still, we couldn't just kick her out when she had no place to go. So we found ourselves caught in her plan and started living together. And this living arrangement was the start of the gears in my happy married life going off track. Jennifer, are you really making Matthew cook his own dinner and eat alone every night? Well, yes, Mom, I explained this already. Jennifer works long hours, so we agreed that whoever has the time does the chores. She's not slacking. If anything, she wakes up early to handle the cleaning and laundry. That's just what a wife should do, isn't it? Jennifer, your shop is always busy and doing well, isn't it? You should act like an owner, delegate tasks to your employees, and take it easy at home. Your apartment is right above the shop, so if something comes up, you can just go downstairs to check on it, right? Well, it's not that simple. Even though the shop is doing well, the rent is $20,000 a month because of the prime location and the size of the property, which includes the residents. Plus, there are employee wages and supply costs. So while the shop is thriving, my take-home pay is only about $1,500. With how busy you seem, $1,500 doesn't sound worth it. Wouldn't it be easier to just get a job somewhere? Don't use this as an excuse to avoid doing housework. Are you pretending to be busy while leaving all the work to your staff and relaxing in the back? Mom, that's enough. Both Jennifer and I agreed on this lifestyle, so stop interfering. What? I'm just saying this for your sake. Patricia made her dissatisfaction evident, glaring at us before retreating to the room she had taken over as her own. This incident marked the beginning of Patricia slowly revealing her true nature. Your mom's package arrived again. It was cash on delivery. Thanks for accepting it. Thanks. This has happened before, and I still haven't been reimbursed for the money I advanced. You make good money with your store. Why complain about a few $100s? Patricia, showing no sign of remorse, grabbed her package and disappeared into her room. The packages always arrived on my day off, as if deliberately scheduled, and just around the time the packages were expected, Patricia would conveniently leave for errands, ensuring she wasn't home. This pattern repeated over and over. She didn't contribute to household expenses. Q&D only did chores for herself. She cooked only when I wasn't home, cleaned only her own room. She left all the laundry for me, and went shopping without ever buying groceries for dinner. I was beginning to understand. Patricia hadn't moved in with us because she wanted to be with family. She simply wanted an easier life. Jennifer, this tea isn't the type I usually drink. Make sure to get the right one tomorrow. She had all day, and the supermarket wasn't far. She could easily go herself. When I discussed the situation with Matthew, Patricia refused to leave, claiming she had no home or money. Even when Matthew tried to address her behavior, any changes were temporary, reverting back within days. Both Matthew and I were growing increasingly frustrated with her presence. But then, something happened that made all our worries seem trivial. Matthew, I'm 3 months pregnant. Really, the news of a baby brought overwhelming joy to our lives. Since we hadn't been expecting it, the happiness felt even greater. The pregnancy also led me to a big decision. At my age, I really want to prioritize raising our child. I don't think I can keep running the store. You're thinking of closing it, but isn't it the store you inherited from Dad? Dad always said the restaurant business was tough, and that I didn't have to push myself to keep it running. I think he'd understand. After giving birth, I plan to take on part-time work. What do you think? Jennifer, you should do whatever feels right for you. Matthew supported my decision to focus on child rearing. I had expected his understanding, so I wasn't too worried about that. The real challenge was Patricia. What? You're closing the store? Yes, I've decided to focus on raising my child. Cleaning up will get harder as my belly grows, so I'm planning to close the store in about 2 months. Also, this house can't be rented unless the first floor space is occupied. So you're saying you have to leave this house too? That's right. But since this house was too big for us in the first place, Matthew and I have been discussing moving to a more comfortable-sized home. You're closing your store, becoming unemployed, and leaving this big house. Are you kidding me? Why don't you just take a break? and reopen the store once the child is older. Well, that's why I want to focus on raising the baby. I won't allow it." Patricia stomped loudly on the floor and marched to her room. "Even if she says she won't allow it, this house was originally mine, and so was the store. The child is also about me and Matthew. Why should Patricia have any say in this?" Although Matthew and I tried multiple times to reason with Patricia, she wouldn't budge. However, this time, I couldn't let Patricia's opinion dictate my decision. So I ignored her protests and put up a notice at the store about the planned closure. When Patricia saw the notice on the store's door, she came up with a bold move. "Huh, this room is empty. Our house has several storage rooms. Among them, the one primarily holding my belongings was completely emptied. Patricia, my stored clothes and bags, even the shelves, they're all gone. While you were working downstairs, I had them taken by a thrift shop. They only fetched a little over $100, but it saved me the trouble of getting rid of the stuff. It's quite convenient." What? I was overcome with a mix of shock, frustration, and disbelief, leaving me momentarily speechless. When I decided to close my store, Patricia started a clear campaign of harassment against me. Her goal was simple. "If you're quitting the store and leaving, get out already." Patricia wanted to push Matthew and me out of the house, but if she did that, she'd have to manage the first floor space herself and pay the rent. I couldn't figure out what she planned to do afterward. It turns out Patricia had a plan. "Ronald is leaving his hospital job to open his clinic. Once you're gone, I'll live here with Ronald and his family. So hurry up and leave." Ronald, Patricia's brother-in-law, worked at a hospital far away, but had plans to become independent and return to this area to open a clinic. Ronald is married and has a daughter in middle school. Patricia seemed intent on replacing us with Ronald's family, essentially leeching off them next. "The doctor, Ronald, and his wife will open their clinic downstairs, so you need to be gone by tomorrow." Every time Patricia saw me, she repeated her demand to leave. "You don't have to be so harsh. In just half a month, I'll be leaving the store anyway. Besides, this was originally my home, and there's something I'm curious about. Can she really afford $20K in rent?" Well, it's not my concern since I'm the one leaving. I decided not to dwell on it for now since I only have half a month left at this store. However, the next day, something happened that made it impossible to ignore. It was my day off, and I had been out shopping. As I climbed the stairs at the back of the store leading to my home, I found Patricia waiting at the top. "Patricia, is something wrong? I told you to leave by tomorrow, didn't I? Watch out." Suddenly, Patricia shoved my shoulder. Reflexively, I let go of the shopping bags in my hands and grabbed the railing. Thanks to that, I managed not to tumble down the stairs. The shopping bags made a loud noise as they stopped halfway down the stairs. The cabbage inside spilled out, rolling down to the bottom, where it got crushed. Broken eggs started oozing out from the bag. Looking at the mess, I felt a chill run down my spine. That was dangerous. What if something happened to my baby? "You're the one at fault for not leaving sooner." Patricia slammed the door shut after storming back into the house. I had intended to endure whatever it took for just half a month, but if my baby's safety was at risk, that was a different story. Gripping the railing tightly, I stood up. If she wanted me out so badly, then fine, I'd leave right away. I left the shopping bags behind and went down the stairs. As soon as I reached the bottom, I made a phone call. "How many large trucks can you provide?" 20 10-ton trucks. "Perfect. Let's schedule for 4 days from now." I've been a business owner for years. Because of that, I have the connections and the knowledge. Patricia, who has lived a relatively ordinary life, has no idea what happens when I truly lose my temper. After hanging up, I came to my senses. Oh no, I didn't tell Matthew anything. Well, he'll understand. I'll let him know later. Shaking off any further worries, I started looking for a hotel for the night. The next day, I decided to close the store ahead of schedule and began dismantling it. When the noise from the construction started, Patricia came downstairs. Oh, closing earlier than planned. Finally, you're leaving. She looked absolutely delighted. If possible, I'd prefer not to see her face again. Well, I'll leave the rest to you. She left the house in high spirits. She's probably going to go shopping. I stayed at the store, overseeing the dismantling work. The following day, and the day after that, the dismantling continued. It seemed Patricia had lost interest in me now that I was leaving, since she didn't come by to check on the progress. Sometimes, she passed by on errands but didn't even glance my way. Finally, the dismantling was complete, leaving the store as an empty shell. The walls and floors were covered with boards and sheets. This was something I had specifically requested from the contractors. It was a necessary preparation for what I planned to do next. As I stood in front of the flattened store, waiting, a 10-ton truck arrived. Because of the road and parking space situation, we'll bring in the trucks one at a time. Understood. Please go ahead. Are you really sure about this? Yes, it's fine. The truck I called wasn't from a moving company. It was a dump truck used for carrying large amounts of construction debris or soil. Dump trucks can tilt their beds to unload. I had asked them to bring in a large load of sand. Just to confirm, we won't take any responsibility if something goes wrong. I understand. It's all written in the contract, so it's fine. All right then. The truck pulled up in front of the store's window and began tilting its bed to pour sand into the building. Tilting the truck bed alone wasn't enough, so they attached equipment to match the window size, ensuring the sand poured in smoothly, as expected of professionals. When the bed was empty, the truck drove off, and the next one arrived to pour more sand through the window. This process repeated as new trucks came and poured sand. Sand was poured not only through the same window, but also through other windows and entrances. After 20 truckloads, the workers leveled the sand with shovels. When the job was done, they left through the windows to prevent the sand from spilling out if the doors were opened. That's it for the job. Thank you. Thank you very much. I cheerfully waved at the last truck as it drove away. Just then, Patricia came out to check what was going on. What? Is that sand? Since the entrance was made of glass, Patricia immediately noticed the store was filled with sand. Her shock was understandable. The ground floor of the store was spacious. It was completely covered with sand, piled up to knee height. Seeing it again, I was relieved the floor hadn't caved in. Please don't open the doors. The sand inside is for playgrounds. If you open the doors, it'll spill out, and you won't be able to close them again. Did you do this as some kind of harassment? That's right. Now we're even. Even. Where's the fairness in this? How much money did you spend on this? Even if you're running a successful business, this is way too much. Playground sand costs about $17 per 100 kilograms. So the sand cost about $300. I also got a good deal on the trucks through a friend in the business. Patricia staggered toward the entrance and peered inside. Suddenly, a sly smile crossed her face. I see. This is borrowed space, after all. You took precautions where needed. Patricia noticed that the floor and walls were protected to prevent damage from the sand. If I hire a crew to haul the sand out, the place will be usable again. And since Ronald is a doctor and has money, this sand is nothing significant. She looked at me with a condescending gaze. She must have thought my actions were a pointless struggle. That worked just fine for me. Patricia, here's the rental contract. Could you sign it for me? Then, can you wait until Ronald gets back? I can't do that since I'm the one leaving. Well, that's easier said than done. Don't worry, this is only temporary. The house belongs to one of my father's acquaintances. He has rented it since he was young, so they're flexible. They even accommodated my sudden move-out request, and they agreed to let Patricia and Ronald stay here. However, they want to avoid having any gaps in the contract, so they asked me to get Patricia's signature. The rent will be deferred until Ronald arrives. And if Ronald wants to revise the contract, he can discuss it after he gets here. That's quite accommodating. That helps a lot. Patricia grabbed a contract from me, went inside the house, and quickly came back out. Is this good enough? You signed it quite easily. Are you okay with the sand issue? I'd prefer to make you clean it, but you'd refuse, wouldn't you? Convincing you would be a waste of time. It's more efficient to just let you leave and have Ronald deal with it. All right then. So the sand issue is settled. I took the contract from Patricia. This confirmed my victory. A few days later, while Matthew and I were relaxing at our new home, Patricia called me. Come to the house right now. I bet you said something to Ronald, didn't you? Apparently, Ronald had shown up at Patricia's house. Should I come with you? Your brother is there. I'll go alone. I headed to Patricia's place on my own. What did you tell Ronald? Patricia, calm down. Exactly. And didn't I explain this to Jennifer before she came? You can't open a clinic here. Why not? It's spacious, well located, and has a living area for the family. Why can't you open a clinic here? Patricia, opening a clinic here isn't feasible. The rent is $20K. But you ran a restaurant here all this time. I told you before, most of the sales went toward rent, leaving me with almost nothing. You're lying. You just didn't want to do housework, so you made up that excuse. No, that's the truth. Why did you keep running the restaurant in such conditions? Ever since before I got married, I've worked with the mindset that as long as I made enough to live on, that was fine. So any extra income went toward keeping prices stable for customers despite inflation, improving facilities for staff, or raising part-timers' wages. You mean to say, despite running such a successful business, you didn't care about money? Everyone has their own values. Do you seriously think you can run a restaurant or a clinic with $20K in rent? Is that true? Aren't doctors supposed to make a lot of money? Don't talk about the medical profession like it's just about profits. Besides, I was only considering rent up to $5K at most. This is unbelievable. It's not just that. It's physically impossible to open a clinic here. Your brother is planning to start an internal medicine practice and intends to bring in various medical equipment. Medical equipment uses much more electricity than restaurants. This building isn't designed for medical use, so the electrical capacity here is totally insufficient for a clinic. Also, he wants to change the location of the water supply and drainage pipes, but the space under the floor makes that seem difficult. It could be resolved with a lot of money, but that would require the landlord's approval, and the costs are too high. Then it makes sense to look for a medical use rental elsewhere. Right, that makes sense now. Wait a minute. How do you even know such detailed information? Did you think Patricia would say she was going to live with Ronald without me confirming it with him? Matthew contacted Ronald to check if he really intended to move into this house. We heard about the rent situation then. So, from the start, they never really planned to move here. Not exactly. Jennifer looked into the electrical capacity and building plans to see if it could be a clinic. When it turned out to be physically impossible, that sealed the decision. The landlord is a flexible person. They quickly looked into the electrical and floor issues and informed us. Then why did you keep quiet about the clinic being impossible until today? That's because Matthew heard about your lifestyle and asked me to teach you a little lesson. The original plan was for Ronald to come here, explain that the clinic couldn't be established, and state that he wouldn't live with you. The idea was for you to admit you couldn't afford the rent and leave. But when I got upset, I added the whole sand thing. That's outrageous. Ronald has no intention of living with you. So clean up the sand and pay the rent yourself. Now that we've said what needs to be said, shall we go? Yes. Go. Where to? Ronald has already rented a different place. Today, Ronald invited Matthew and me to his new house. Matthew is already there, so we need to hurry. Wait, I really don't have any money. Don't leave me alone in this sandy house. You signed a lease knowing about the rent and the sand, didn't you? It's not my problem. Ronald and I left Patricia and the piles of sand behind. Later, Patricia removed the sand and moved out. The cost of removing the sand alone was around $500. While pouring the sand in was easy, removing it from the building required manual labor because machines couldn't be used. Labor costs were around $150 per person per day. It took 5 people about a week to remove the sand, costing over $5K in labor alone. Additionally, renting 10-ton trucks to transport the sand cost about $400 per day. They rented 5 trucks and spent 2 days transporting the sand, costing around $4K. As a result, Patricia, unlike me, who had no connections, ended up spending nearly $10K just to remove the sand. But the misfortunes that befell Patricia didn't end there. The landlord, who had been flexible with me in various ways, apparently wasn't willing to extend the same courtesy to Patricia. Patricia was forced to move out almost immediately after signing the lease. As a result, the landlord charged her a $20K penalty for breaking the contract. It seems Patricia was telling the truth when she said she didn't have much money. After paying the $30K this time, most of her savings were wiped out, with her finances nearly depleted. Patricia moved into a cheaper apartment and started working a job cutting vegetables in a factory she found through senior job listings. From now on, I think it's better for her to live independently without relying on her kids. I called my regular customers to inform them that I had decided to close the shop earlier than planned. Since they had made reservations by phone, I had their names and contact numbers. For about a week, I went through the reservation book and kept making calls. The regulars expressed regret about the shop closing, but more than that, they congratulated me on the pregnancy. Looking down at my slightly rounded belly, I found myself thinking that maybe, just maybe, I could open a small shop again someday.
Why didn't you come to Mom's funeral, sis? What? I never thought you were such a terrible person. I was at a loss when my younger brother suddenly said this to me over the phone. But there was no sign of lying in his sobbing voice. James. Mom passed away 5 years ago, you know? My name is Jessica, a 30-year-old office worker. I'm dating a man named Robert, and we've just started seeing each other. He's serious about marrying me and wants to meet my parents soon. But I feel guilty about that. That's because my parents divorced a long time ago, and both of them have already passed away. My father and mother reached an irreparable state due to misunderstandings, and they ended up divorcing. At that time, I was 16, and after the divorce, I was taken in by my father. Even after the divorce, My father cared for me very much and allowed me to do anything I wanted. Thanks to him, I was able to continue learning the piano, which I had been doing since I was young, and even attended cram school. In return, I did my best with the household chores as long as it didn't interfere with my studies. I tried to cook dinner as much as possible, and although it was mostly rice balls, I prepared lunch for my father. The rice balls you make are always delicious, Jessica. I remember being happy when my father praised me like that. Then I went on to college. I worked hard in my studies, so I was able to get into a fairly prestigious university. Jessica, you did a great job. Going to a higher-level university than your father and mother is amazing. I was very happy to see my father's joyful face. By the way, my father told me it was okay to see my mother, so I visited her regularly. Ah, big sister. James, long time no see. Jessica, have you been well? Yeah, how about you and James, Mom? I'm fine, and James has more energy than he knows what to do with. After the divorce, my mother lived with my younger brother James. James is 7 years younger than me, and he was 11 when I decided to go to college. My elementary school-aged brother still had an innocent look, and he always looked very happy to see me. I was sad not to live with my brother, but I was happy to see him healthy and well when we met regularly. Jessica, you got into college? And it's a pretty tough one, isn't it? That's amazing. Sis, you're awesome. Thank you both. Let's go out for steak to celebrate today. Really? Yay! Wow! Steak! Even though my parents were divorced, I had a good relationship with my mother and brother, and I always felt happy when I saw them. But after I started college, my mother remarried another man. Since then, it became difficult to see my brother. My husband wants me to get used to our life together, so he doesn't want me to see my previous family too much. Is that so? I felt mixed emotions when my mother told me this over the phone. Of course, I don't mind and am even happy that my mother has remarried and found happiness. But I don't want to lose the opportunity to see my brother. Can't we just reduce the frequency of our meetings? I'm sorry, but James is entering adolescence, and I don't want to confuse him too much. I see. But once we get used to our new life, I'm sure my husband will let us meet. Yeah, I understand. I wasn't really convinced, but I didn't want to protest and risk ruining my mother and brother's relationship with their new father, so I decided to endure it. After that, I finished college and got a job. During that time, I couldn't see my brother or mother. It's been 4 years. They could let me see them at least once. No, maybe they're living such fulfilling lives that they don't need to see me anymore. My brother, who was 11 at the time, is now 15. I want to send some encouragement to my brother, who is preparing for private high school entrance exams. With that thought, I bravely called my mother. Then, I heard an unfamiliar man's voice. Hello? Who is this? Isn't this my mother's number? Are you Jessica by any chance? Yes. I'm David, the man who remarried your mother. She's busy right now, so I answered the phone. Oh, I see. What's the reason for your call? Well, it's been 4 years since I last saw them, and I was thinking I'd like to see my brother and mother soon. When I said that, the man named David made a surprising statement. Really? You haven't seen them? What? I thought you were meeting them regularly. No, I haven't seen them at all. I see. Maybe your mother doesn't want to see you. What? Actually, when I mentioned your name just now, my wife didn't react at all. That can't be. Is James not around? I at least want my brother to respond to my call. I was thinking that, but David said, James is right next to me, but he's just playing a game and not reacting at all. It seems like they've both forgotten about you and adapted to their current lives. They're both living happily, so could you please leave them alone? I'm going to hang up now. With that, David hung up. I was so shocked that I couldn't move for a while after the call ended. I didn't want to believe that my brother and mother had forgotten about me and were living their lives. When I consulted my father, he said, That's strange. Those two love you, Jessica, and called my mother. But she told him, Please don't call again. And in the end, we couldn't meet or talk to my mother and brother. After that, I became busier with work and couldn't see my brother and mother, and time passed with them still in the back of my mind. Then, about 3 years after that phone call, I received sad news. What? Mom? It was a notification that my mother had died in a traffic accident. I rushed to the hospital. In the room where the hospital staff guided me, I saw my mother's lifeless body. Her face looked as if she was just sleeping, with her eyes closed and a gentle expression. No. Mom. I hadn't seen my mother in 7 years. I never thought I would meet her again like this. Sis. James. As I was mourning my mother's death, my brother came into the room. My brother, whom I hadn't seen in 7 years, had grown up completely. It's been a long time. Why didn't you come to see us? What? Did you start hating me and Mom? Wait a minute. It was your stepfather David who told me not to see you. Dad? Dad would never say something like that. What? Dad's an amazing person, and I look up to him. So he wouldn't say something like not meeting with you, sis. What? My brother seemed to trust our stepfather, David, quite a bit. They must have formed a strong bond over these 7 years. Then, a man who appeared to be David arrived. Hi. It's our first time meeting in person, isn't it? Hello. David was a man in his early 50s, with an ambitious look about him, like someone who could really get things done. I've seen various company employees in my work, and somehow, he gave me the impression of being a bit cunning. I'm really shocked that my wife passed away so suddenly. The funeral will be held soon, so I'd like both you and your father to attend, Jessica. Understood. There were many things on my mind, but the priority was my mother's funeral. My father and I attended my mother's funeral together and saw her off. The funeral went without incident, but there was a dispute over the inheritance. Jessica hasn't seen my wife in 7 years, so could you please give up the inheritance? What? Wait a minute. Wasn't it David who didn't let me see her? As I said that, my brother interrupted. Sis, are you still saying that? How many times do I have to explain that Dad would never do that? James, believe me. Your stepfather told me not to see you and Mom anymore. He told me to leave you alone. No matter how desperately I pleaded, my brother wouldn't believe me. Oh dear, it seems I've become the villain here. Dad's not wrong. Sis is just saying weird things. James. Sis, I don't really understand inheritance, but will you give it up? What? I should at least receive the minimum inheritance, right? What would Mom think if she saw you being so greedy about money? David treated me as if I were money grubbing. Then my father stepped in. Wait a minute. My daughter is only claiming her rightful share. Stop making such accusations. Thanks to my father's words, David closed his mouth. No matter what you say, I'll make sure my daughter gets at least the minimum inheritance. What's this? Are you and Sis conspiring to make things difficult for us? That's not the case. This is just a claim of rights. The discussion was difficult, and in the end, I was able to receive only the minimum inheritance, but a rift formed between my brother and me. It was because I had become antagonistic with David, my brother's trusted stepfather. I had finally seen my brother after so long, only to be disliked by him. Losing my mother was sad enough, and this made it even harder mentally. And then, more misfortune struck me. My father was diagnosed with cancer. He was given only one more year to live. I felt like I was being crushed by repeated misfortunes. Why is this happening to me? I became quite negative. But my father, noticing my change, spoke to me gently. Jessica, everyone dies someday. It's not something we can control. I've been happy living with you all this time, and I intend to enjoy the time I have left to the fullest. Dad. After that, my father and I went on trips and did everything he wanted to do before he passed away. Losing both of my beloved parents was incredibly painful, but my father's last words were, "Look forward and enjoy every moment of life." So I wiped away my tears and chose to move on. My brother came to my father's funeral, but he brought David with him. Because of that, my brother was aggressive towards me, and all he talked about was my father's inheritance. Sis, you forcibly took part of Mom's inheritance, so I'm definitely taking Dad's inheritance. I didn't want to fight or be hostile anymore. So I quietly agreed. Yes, of course. I was planning to give it to you anyway. I said that and made arrangements for the inheritance to be transferred to my brother. I haven't seen my brother since then. He hasn't contacted me, and I felt awkward reaching out to him. A few years passed, and I met Robert through a friend's introduction. He was considering marriage, and I decided to tell him everything. That both my parents were gone, and that I was almost estranged from my only sibling, my brother. Robert listened to everything and still wanted to marry me. I fell in love with him. We continued to date smoothly and received a marriage proposal. This must be what it feels like to be on top of the world. But at that moment, I suddenly received a call from my brother. Hello, James, it's been a while, hasn't it? What's up? Oh, speaking of which, I have something to tell you too. I was so happy to hear from my brother after so long that I started talking rapidly. Then my brother interrupted me with something incomprehensible. Sis, why didn't you come to Mom's funeral? I never thought you were such a terrible person. What? I didn't think my sister was such a terrible person. I was confused by my brother's sudden accusation over the phone. What's going on? Why are you saying something so nonsensical all of a sudden? Nonsensical? Mom's dead, you know. Wait, James, calm down. How can I calm down? Was this some kind of cruel joke? No, it was too harsh for that. But there was no hint of lying in my sobbing brother's voice. I took a deep breath and calmed myself and spoke slowly to my brother. James, Mom died 5 years ago. Then my brother's shocking reply came. What are you talking about? Mom didn't die back then. What? What are you talking about? You saw Mom's body too, didn't you? And we even had the funeral. I couldn't understand why my brother was saying such things. No, Mom was alive. I lived with her for about 3 years after that. What? What do you mean? So I was living with Mom. I really couldn't understand what my brother was saying. Mom was alive? It's best to go along with the story at times like this. Yes. but they said she would die soon without an offering. I gave all the money I earned as an offering. What? At that moment, I realized that my brother had been deceived. But the offering wasn't enough, and Mom died. James, can you introduce me to the person you've been making offerings to? Of course. You should be saved too, sis. That person found where Mom was and rescued her. James! Later, I went with my brother to meet the person he had been making offerings to. The place was in a regular office building, where counseling was conducted. If you consult with the teacher, he'll solve any problem for you. Teacher! When my brother led me into a private office, David was there. Why are you? Oh, if it isn't Jessica. Wait a minute. You're the one who remarried my mother and became James's stepfather, right? Why is James calling you teacher? James and I have a patient-teacher relationship. What? No, you lived with James, right? James even called you Dad. Sis, what are you talking about? David is a counselor. Dad died 3 years ago, remember? Wait. David, are you brainwashing James? What are you talking about? I've just been listening to him. Before that, I was counseling his mother. What? You deceived my mother too? Sis, don't say such terrible things like deceived. James. Jessica seems quite confused. Well, it's understandable. Losing both parents can often lead to mental illness. What are you talking about? You've unconsciously put a stopper in your mind to avoid facing reality. You're suppressing the grief of losing your parents. I can help you release it. Stop it! I'm already looking forward and living my life. Really? Aren't you just enduring it? I'm not enduring anything. It's better not to force yourself. If you do as I say, your heart will feel much lighter. Really? James became cheerful that way too. So why not entrust yourself to me? Yes, please. Good girl. Now sit here and think about your mom and dad. When I place my hands on your head, the sad feelings will magically disappear. How about it? Do you feel lighter? No. I don't feel any lighter. I see. Maybe it's because the offering is 0, so there's not enough power. What? If you really want to get better, you have to make a lot of offerings to summon the power. Is that so? Yeah, so let's start with an offering of $1,000. $1,000. That's still not enough. To be completely healed, you need to make more and more offerings. Is that so? James made offerings too, right? Yes, he's been making offerings ever since he graduated from high school and started working. That's how he was able to find his mother and regain happy days. But the offering stopped at one point, and his mother really died this time. So he's reflecting on that and increasing his offerings to be saved. I see. I called out towards the entrance. That's how it is, Robert. As I said that, the door to the room opened, and my fiancé Robert walked in. Who exactly are you? David asked with a suspicious look at Robert, who then handed David his business card. I'm a lawyer. I've been listening to your conversation, and it seems you've been brainwashing James and swindling a large sum of money from him. A lawyer? He's also my fiancé. And we're going to sue you and recover the money. As I said that, David momentarily looked flustered but then snorted and retorted. I thought you'd say something like that. James was saved by me. There's no fact that I deceived him. I was just providing legitimate counseling. Right, James? David asked my brother with a triumphant look on his face. My brother glanced at us and then said, I was deceived by you and forced to contribute a large sum of money. James. You. David's eyes widened at my brother's statement. It seems your brother intends to sue you. Wait. This must be some mistake, right? James, I saved you. Are you going to betray me like this? Teacher, I do think that thanks to you, both my mother and I felt relieved many times. But it's also true that you were gradually brainwashing us, right? In fact, I became unable to make sound judgments because of you. You brought a woman who looked like my mother and made me believe that she was actually alive, and then you instilled fear that she would die if I didn't make offerings. Moreover, you disposed of all the photos of my mother and me without my noticing and replaced them with composite photos of a fake mother. The pictures were so sophisticated and natural that I naturally believed the fake mother was my real mother. And before I knew it, almost all of my salary from the years since I graduated from high school and started working was taken by you. When I met my sister and saw the real photos of my mother, the brainwashing suddenly broke. That's when I decided to sue you, capturing evidence of you actually demanding an exorbitant amount of money. You betrayed me. Don't mess with me. You're the one who kept swindling money from me and my mother. You brainwashed us, telling us not to meet my sister, and even made us lie that you were our stepfather. My mother died without seeing my sister for years. I'll not only get back the money you took from me, but also the money you took from my mother. You've sucked money from us and enjoyed yourself, now suffer misfortune. My brother angrily confronted David with such intensity that David stumbled back in surprise. Then we'll see you in court, Robert said, and we left the scene. After that, James sued David under Robert's legal representation. David was offered to pay back the total amount of $300,000 that he had swindled from my brother and mother. Not only was David offered to pay compensation, but his outrageous fraudulence became known to his previous patients and their families, and he seems to be in serious trouble due to lawsuits and compensation claims from many people. But he had been doing as he pleased for so long that he deserved to be punished. I realized that our relationship had been strained because of the brainwashing, and with everything resolved, the resentment between my brother and me disappeared. My brother also attended my wedding with Robert. I hadn't seen my brother for many years because of David, but now I want to fill that gap by regularly meeting and getting along well with my only sibling.